And our mindset was, we're going to get through this. We're going to be grandparents one day. As a guy, as a man, I think we sometimes are at fault of like holding in our emotions and trying to hold it together and be the tough guy, right? And the one thing that I wish you could have seen was how scared I was, right? And so I was so scared, right?
You would leave. I didn't want you to feel like, I couldn't handle it, but there were many times that I was just really tired and really, pushing through. So in 2016, December of 2016, I had a miscarriage. It was, unexpected. And obviously, you go through the process of losing a child. And then, I then started to, move on with, of course, life. Unfortunately, I had to go back to school. And at the time I was in the LVN program. So I was doing clinical rotations and stuff. And it was in April, and I was just at a clinical rotation. And I just remember just having excruciating, left upper quadrant pain in my abdomen. And it wouldn't go away. I mean, it came and it was so sudden and it was so sharp. And I just felt, this stabbing, almost, unbearable discomfort. I remember just feeling like, that night I couldn't sleep. I felt like a bowling ball was inside of, my abdomen, and it was very painful. It wasn't until I had gotten my blood work that I realized that not only was I pregnant again, but also that I had very alarming blood work. And that was the first thing that, the provider had said. You have really alarming blood work. I'm super concerned. They were like, we don't even know if you're going to be able to carry this baby. These are not good numbers, and we need to do a bone marrow biopsy, right away. And I remember questioning the physician and saying, are you sure? Like, we can't wait until like I have, this baby? Is there anything else that we can do? And he's like, no, Karina, we need to do a bone marrow biopsy. And this needs to happen right away. So, there was a lot of uncertainty. And I'll be honest with you, when these things are being told to you, at least for me, you just go into a fog.
I think that was the biggest concern is the baby going to make it? We had just lost a baby, and is our baby going to be okay? And so never in a thousand years did we think that we were, she was going to get diagnosed with something, as serious as she did. And so I'm there, I'm, being supportive, and you know, I think the bone marrow biopsy itself was just kind of a very, it was just a very hard to watch. The first doctor was like, "Hey, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You've got myelofibrosis. It's a rare kind of, uh, cancer, and you've got 10 years to live, right?" And we're like, like what? And then so then the other doctor was like, whoa, 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 like, we don't know if it's 10. I was like, we just, considering your age and where it's at in the progression. And he started kind of going down the at that point, like, I mean, I think once they said you've got cancer, you got 10 years to live, I spaced out. I was like a space cadet, right? Because I was just kind of looking at her like, what did we just like hear?
I just really couldn't believe, what was being told to me. It was just very bold. It was definitive because, at the time I had a bone marrow biopsy. So, whatever it is that they saw, in the cellular level, we were talking pretty factual with what was going on. Kind of like the movies, when it just gets super radio silent, I heard it and I just no longer could process, everything that was being told, where I was hearing donor and I was hearing transplants and I was hearing, we're going to just have to kind of see how this pregnancy goes. But it was all in like little pieces, I really couldn't couldn't gather myself with it. The majority of my pain was this spleen pain that I had. And it would radiate, all the way to my back, to my shoulder. It was very constant. It was very difficult because for years I went without being able to sleep on my left side. I slept for years on my right, because I just always felt a tremendous amount of pressure, on my left side. I started to feel very fatigued because instantly I found out that I was super anemic. Quickly, I needed to motion with blood transfusions. So, I was pregnant and I had to get blood transfusions. And so I remember just feeling very tired. And I think it was a combination of I just found out I was pregnant and now I'm a cancer patient. And so, it really amplified, my fatigue and just feeling, off. The neuropathy, I remember I did have that. I had a lot of burning on my toes and
Mhm.
on my fingers. It was like a torch. I mean, I remember just telling Jesse, like, oh my gosh, my fingers, like, they burn so bad. And my shoes, I remember having to just be like walking around and having to step outside of Target and just remove my shoes to make sure that I didn't have ants in there or something that was, you know, um, biting me because I just had so much pain. So that's true. I remember
Mhm.
I did have that. My husband was the one that looked up everything,
Mhm.
researched everything. He was the one that was like, we're getting a second opinion and we're going to MD Anderson in Houston.
Well, first and foremost, because I love her, right? And but I think you kind of get as a husband. I just kind of got in this kind of fight or flight mode. I think I was like, man, I don't want to lose her. What do I do? What can I do? Because I mean, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what we're dealing with. She doesn't really know at the moment. I was like, so I just needed to educate myself. And the one thing with her condition was, and we kept hearing it over and over and over, which was very uneasy. And it didn't sit well with me. Was, well, we know what myelofibrosis is, but we've never dealt with it with someone that's pregnant. And I'm like, and hearing it from a physician, you're just kind of like, okay, well, that doesn't sit really well with me. So I needed, and so I started doing a ton of research.
They orchestrated my plan of care,
Hmm.
and so that was something very beneficial, for me was being able to have my local doctor, but at the same time having,
Yeah.
somebody in Houston, that was going to also be monitoring my care.
In Houston, they were like, let's have the baby. We're going to be kind of in a watch and wait right now,
Hmm.
and we're going to allow you to have the baby. We're going to focus on that, and we're going to treat any symptoms that arise through the process, right? And so that was the approach. That was the treatment plan, and we were very, very in agreement with that, right? Because we still wanted our baby. They were very apt to like, let's have the baby. We also want you to, if you're going to nurse afterward, do that, and then once we're ready, then we're going to aggressively treat this cancer, right?
I knew that at some point I was going to need this. Now, myelofibrosis, with the education that Jesse provided, and of course, as I continue to, get more educated on it, myelofibrosis is a chronic leukemia. So you are literally like in a state where you're watching and you're waiting. And the
Mhm.
patience that it takes to be ill and to not really have control on when you're going to get out of all these oral chemos and adjusting and all these, blood transfusions and all these different symptoms that you begin to have, like night sweats and, starting to have bone pain and starting to have, this constant, spleen pain and not feeling good and being super fatigued. I waited 2 years until I shared, what I had with people. One, because I didn't look like it. And that was very difficult because stereotypically, when people have cancer, you want to unfortunately see them in a state that looks like a cancer patient. You have no hair, you're frail, you look sick. And I couldn't be so far from that. I had all my hair. I looked normal, and I definitely acted normal. I wanted my kids from day one to see a very strong mom, a mom that could continue to go to school, a mom that could continue to work, and a mom that still got up and got ready. And so not only did I, try to fulfill that, but more it was my spirit that just wasn't going to be shaken. And I was alive today. And I had control of how I was going to be in the mindset. And that was something that I, in the watch and wait, was so determined to stay so in sync with, which was my faith and the fact that I was going to smile in the storm.
Hey guys, this is the day that the Lord has made, and I am just rejoicing and so happy that I will soon ring the bell. Ringing the bell is a symbolization that you're done with treatment. It's the end of treatment.
And so that watch and wait really built a lot of resilience for me because I just needed to be patient with how long this was going to take, not knowing that it would be 6 years until it was time to have a transplant. Those 6 years for me were long, they were heavy. Um, they really brought me to my knees. I had a lot of trial and error. I suffered greatly with so many GI issues. I had to be in the restroom all the time. I was very challenged emotionally, mentally, physically, and never spiritually. And I can summarize those 6 years as praising in the storm and staying so focused on that this was not going to be my forever. And I was determined to just do whatever they said I had to do and continue going to MD Anderson, monthly or however often they had to see me and going to my appointments. And at the same time, pushing through, to graduate to be an LVN, to then becoming an RN, to then, going and finishing my BSN, to even beginning before transplant, my family nurse practitioner program. And, it was just important to continue going. So it was a lot of sadness, hardship, difficulty being under chemo and all that entails and, to your body. But pressing forward in hope, for sure. For sure. Lots of hope that kept me going all those years.
I think for the 6 years, it was important for me to constantly remind family and friends, even coworkers, that she was sick, right? And so, she alluded that she didn't look sick, but she was sick, and she was on chemos, some pretty aggressive ones, oral chemos, and um, but she powered through. I mean, she was a trooper. I mean, she was a mom, she was a student, she was a wife, supportive to her family, and so I think that was my role for the 6 years, right? Is just to make sure that I was there to kind of be her little battle buddy, right, and just to make sure that she was okay. Yeah, but it was rough. I mean, it was tough seeing her because there was times where she wasn't the same Karina. She wasn't the same Karina. She was tired, and I had to accept that.
I remember just having a bone marrow biopsy again, because this is something that you do very frequently with myelofibrosis is, you have to, you know, do this to see the progression of your disease. And I had a bone marrow biopsy. I remember when my blood work came in, he was just like, Karina, something's super wrong. Um, this is very bad and you need to be admitted. And I was like, what? So I remember I was like very like, thrown back. I really didn't know what was going on. But I got admitted to then discover that I was internally bleeding. And that's when MD Anderson said, Dr. Verstosovic had said, it's time. You're you're 39 years old and you're not getting any younger, and you have, the fight in you. And I feel like if we wait, you're still going to have to do this no matter what. But why wait till everything shuts down? Right now, you have a little bit to be able to just get you through transplant. And this is time. We need to start looking for a donor. And my doctor here locally agreed. And he was like, yep. And when that bone marrow biopsy, the last one I had gotten done, came back, I had already now had new mutations. So I was already progressing into, having new mutations other than the JAK2 mutation, and mutations that could lead me to having acute myeloid leukemia. So, it was just not only with the whole spleen change and no splenic vein and internally bleeding, but also just that it was just getting worse also in the fact that new mutations were discovered. When it was time to find a match, I also was not educated on how difficult it was going to be, being that I'm a Latina, so a minority. MD Anderson had me on a, huge list, and they do their work, and they were telling me this is going to be really hard, to find one. And Jesse just said, well, all we can do is just start to advocate and go out there. And he started orchestrating all of this, for us. And, I just remember we weren't being really successful, and we needed to find one, and we needed to figure out what the next plan was for transplant. And they said, how about your son? And at the time, my son, David, was, 16. So, I remember telling DJ, are you willing to do some blood work and see if you're possibly my match? And it was a no-brainer for him. I mean, he was like, absolutely, mom, I got this. So he went, he did the blood work. We went through a lot trying to get the word out. And, the whole entire time, DJ's doing it on the back burner. He's getting blood work, we're seeing. And then I got that phone call, and it was, Karina, we found your match. And I said, wow. And they go, your son, he's your match. I could never really put into words what that phone call was for me. It was more than just, wow, your son's going to be your match. It was like, I have prayed so hard for this, and the entire time, my prayer was answered. It was under my roof, to be my match, and his bravery. And I remember just watching him and just being like, God, he's so strong. Like, doesn't complain. He's just going through everything. And I'm just in awe. And I remember telling him, I'm so proud of you. Like, thank you so much, and whether this works or it doesn't work, like, you're my hero. Like, I could never put into words, what I feel that you're gifting me life. So I am in remission. I did engraft, all of my son's stem cells. So, I'm a living, breathing miracle because, my son gifted me life.
We're going to continue to grow old together, and we're going to see our kids. We're going to be grandparents. And we said that from the very beginning. I think when we went into transplant, our focus and our mindset was we're going to get through this. We're going to be grandparents one day. Through transplant, she would push her IV pole, and we had a picture of our kids there, and that was a motivation, right?
It was just tough because I always wanted to put my game face on, and that was really important for me to not worry you. I wanted to let you know, like, yeah, we got this, and I'm good. And but there were many times that, I did feel like, wow, this is hard, and I really don't know what's going to happen, Jesse, but we're just going to have to push through this as best as we can.
I have a profound respect for everything that you've done through the entire cancer battle, right? Continuing to be in school and a mom and being a husband to a guy in the military that leaves all the time. And so I'm super proud. I think I don't tell you that enough. And I think you know you're fantastic. You're my
Thank you.
superhero.
Thank you. Cancer just really amplified your good heart. I mean, you've been so constant since day one. I mean, since the first day I met you, all the promises that you made, you've kept them. You've never failed me in any way. I mean, you are God centered. You are so wonderful, so sacrificial. And I think that, something that is very challenging when you're a cancer patient is that your entire look changes. I went from this voluptuous long hair and, different kind of body to, having no hair, no figure, throwing up, having vulnerability, that you really just displayed that no matter how I looked, no matter, what I was going through, you would always say, I love you bald, I love your new body. And I would just cry and I would say, oh my gosh, Jesse. And you're like, you're perfect for me. I love you no matter what. And I think through cancer, I realized that we were definitely a divine orchestration that, God had set for us, and that I was so blessed and continue to be so blessed to have found, a genuine love. I mean, a real, true, genuine love for sure. The most important thing that got me through is the power of the mindset. And I think that is something that I want to highlight, which is, when we can't control what our body is doing, when we can't control what's to come, when we're uncertain of many things, the one thing that we can have control over is our outlook on it. Be easy on yourself because you're going through so much. And so to really just love yourself during this time and know how to facilitate a healthy mindset is beneficial from beginning to end.
I think for caregivers, supportive mindset, right? Continue to be supportive, but take care of yourself as well, right? I think that that's super important because as a caregiver, it can sometimes feel like the world is kind of on your shoulders. Seeing your significant other, struggle and hurt is not easy, and not having all the answers is extremely difficult. And so education is another thing. But I think above all else is just a positive mindset and be supportive of the person that you most love that's sick.